Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Anne Lounsbury, Chair of the Department of Russian Slavic Studies here at NYU, and it is my huge pleasure to introduce our two speakers today. Evgeniey Альбац is research professor in the NYU Department of Russian Slavic Studies. She's an investigative journalist, political scientist, author, and radio host. And since getting her PhD in political science from Harvard, she split her time between academia and journalism. Dr. Альбац was previously Distinguished Journalist in Residence at the Jordan Center here at NYU from 2022 to 2023. And she's also been a Media and Democracy Fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School and a Fellow at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard. She teaches political science at the Harvard Extension School and is the author of 4 independently researched books, including The State Within a State, KGB and its Hold on Russia, Past, Present, and Future. And it's also my great pleasure to introduce Nina Hrущева, a professor of international affairs at the New School in New York City, and an editor of and contributor to Project Syndicate, Association of Newspapers around the world. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and her articles have appeared in Foreign Affairs, New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and other international publications. She's the author of several books in English and Russian, including In Putin's Footsteps, Searching for the Soul of an Empire across Russia's 11 time zones, and Imagining Volga, Russia Between Art and Politics. Her latest book, which is in Russian, is a biography of her great-grandfather, Nikita Khrushchev, an outlier of the system. Thank you very much, and welcome.
If you need some protection in the evening, that's exactly the kind of book you want to carry in your and your backpack. Yes, it's impossible to do. And thank you so much for your so kind words, and thank you very much to the Jordan Center and Department of Russian and Slavic Studies for setting up this seminar. So I'm very grateful that we can do this. I'm also very grateful to all people who are of course it's a teamwork, and you understand that that it's important that different people get involved and do a lot of very important job. And of course Sasha Spitalnik, all of you know her. First and foremost, she's basically the executive director of the Jordan Center. No, you don't? No, I thought you did. So anyway, and of course Kirill Guskov, who is producer and who is responsible for all the promotions. So it's him who is doing this. Anna Mentar. Anna, where are you, Anna?
She's over there.
She's over there. She's yes. And Daniela Arias also. So this is the team of people who are doing this. So I'm very, very grateful to that. Now, of course, I'm very pleased that Professor Nina Hrущева is speaking at the seminar. And in fact, she's giving her talk the second time. The first time, we had her talk at Harvard. In Moscow, we live 3 blocks from each other. And when Nina travels to Moscow, where I'm not allowed to enter, she sends me photos of my Moscow. I'm very nostalgic. I badly want to do that to home. And unfortunately, I cannot. And Nina just, she writes, Zhenya, do you want pictures or better not? And I said, no, please. So, of course, Nina wrote this very, very interesting book. And even though, I read most of the books on Khrushchev. And of course, this, the biography, which was written by Bill Taubman many years ago. This is book to read because there are a lot of personal stories that nobody but people from Nikita Khrushchev's family, the one-time leader who opened gates of Gulag. There is a lot of material about the stuff that nobody but his immediate family knows about. This book was published in Moscow. Hopefully it will be translated into English. There were a couple of problems with this book. Nina was supposed to speak in Yekaterinburg at the Yeltsin Center, and she didn't. She flew to Yekaterinburg and then flew back to Moscow because either authorities in Moscow or authorities in Ekaterinburg didn't want to separate that. So that's my very quick, I will have tons of questions to her after the talk, but Professor Hrущева has been traveling to Russia at least twice a year since the start of the war, studying Russian propaganda, including street propaganda, not only in the capital, but also in other Russian cities. She has now been to Vологdu, which is deep in the northern, very Slavic part of Russia. It's almost 400 kilometers northeast of Moscow. It's about 300 miles. And she was to Rybinsk in central Russia. This is very important as there is very little information coming out of Russia itself. In the majority of papers that we read about Russian public opinion, what Russians think, what they don't think, what they do, what they don't do, is published, by people who do it here in the United States or in Great Britain. And unfortunately, sometimes you don't understand what you are reading. So now, Nina prepared a presentation, and Nina, the floor is yours.
Well, I was not planning to present. I was planning to answer questions.
You will have.
Okay. So just very quickly, I've been going to Moscow for 4 years now. I mean, I've been going before. I was going before, but 4 years because I really wanted to see what it is and how it happened, and basically witness to creation of dictatorship in real time. We very rarely have this opportunity. So an opportunity that you actually want, but once you have it, it's an important thing to do, is to witness. And so I've been documenting. Jenny mentioned Vологdu and Rybinsk, which I went to this winter, but probably all in all, I went to about 20 cities. Maybe even more, and try to witness people's attitudes, what they think, how they think, why it happened. And the experience has been amazing, because when you read Western press, opposition press less so, but Western press, Russians support Putin, Russians support the war, 80% is for, and that has not been my experience at all. Not that they don't, and not that they're not there who do. But in many conversations, including, I don't know, you go into a drugstore. I was just last month, I published a long piece in Foreign Affairs called Russia, I think Russia's Road to Tyranny or something like that, which not a good title, especially if you continue going to Moscow, but we can't help it. They make up their own titles. But so when I was writing it, particularly in the summer, when I was in Moscow and I was putting together all my information, I got thoroughly depressed, just because when you see all these restrictions, especially in the summer, it seemed like that kind of a straitjacket of Putin is going tighter, but slowly, what's boiling that frog slowly. And suddenly in the summer, it seemed like it was almost falling off the cliff, which it actually didn't. The thing about Russia, 11 time zones, double ego, so there's really no straight answer to anything, is that you kind of think that Russia is going to collapse tomorrow, but it doesn't. And in fact, it kind of circles around, oh, I'm back. So it did seem, when I was going in the winter now, in December, I thought that by now it should be completely collapsing, but it wasn't. In fact, it was less restrictive on the surface, at least, than it was in the summer, because in the summer it was a shock of restriction that, remember, the former governor of the coast region, who became the Minister of Transport, Sfera, committed suicide, which we really have not seen on that level since Stalin times. So that really was a great indicator of how what's going on. WhatsApp was banned for phone calls. So, for example, if I want to call Jenny, I need to be on VPN all the time. So it was suddenly fast. And so I got depressed putting together all this information. So I went to the doctor, and the doctor clearly didn't want to discuss anything of the war. So life is very difficult. And well, the war is going, life is very difficult. Okay, I got the message. So I'll give you Zoloft. Fine, Zoloft, fine. I'm okay.
Could you buy some?
Yes, absolutely. So I went to the drugstore with my Zoloft, right next to where we live in dлившейся, 36 and 6. So we know the area very well. And the woman knows me because she has been there, drugstore attendant for many, many years. So she knows, you see my face. And so she said, oh, when I gave her my prescription, she said, oh, you're one of those. And excuse me, what's those? Like, oh, everybody's so depressed. Really, I thought I was, oh my God, you can imagine. I mean, we sell about 10 packets a day, more than that. And then there's also the Russian remedy, those of you who know Russian, the Volidol, which is the little tablet that you suck on and it kind of calms you down. And she said, Volidol is flying off the shelves. So we have to order every week. And like, wait a minute, what's going on? And so there's a Levada center that does polling in Russia, which is reasonably, I guess, reasonably objective, although of course in a country at war, even if the war is hidden or sort of hidden, it's difficult to know exactly what the numbers are. But there is another one, which basically works for the Kremlin. So they did a study right around that time in the middle of summer where Russians are happy. And I just want to say that, so the happiness index out of 10, I think Russians were at 7, 8 or 8 something. But obviously, many people here are Russianists, so know of Russia. Russians are not, they're just not such, there's no such thing as Russian happy. I mean, it's a grumpy culture. Dostoevsky, I mean, it's right there. So the fact that even there is a happiness index in Russia is already an oxymoron in terms. So I say that to the drugstore person. I said, wait, but there is a happiness index and everybody's happy. I said, okay, kidding. Well, of course, they have to say it. They are happy. Otherwise, they'll go to jail. She says to me, right there in Moscow, just like that. So they have to say it. So I buy my Volidol and I buy my Zoloft and I go home. What's going on?
We have a problem with mic. Go to my. There's a mic. Very good mic.
So this is a microphone right here, but we don't have any other microphones. That would, is your mic?
Yeah, that's what I asked.
Amplifies in the.
I have in my room.
Okay.
Okay, can you hear me now? All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I take my Zoloft and I take my Volidol and I get out of there. And then I do research because that's what we do. So people buy antidepressants all the time. So I go online, and that's amazing because I mean soon it's going to be only the white internet, so you wouldn't be able to go online. But so far you go online, and there is indeed numbers of how many packets of antidepressants Russians have been buying since 2021. So I think it was 2020 was 9 million. I think there was 11 million, then there was 13, 2024, 15 million. And the recent number just came out, I think it's 22 million. So I just had my amazing anthropological confirmation. So I had my anthropology and then I had my numbers. So you see this kind of thing, and most of the time the conversations are like that. Even those who say, well, we have to fight because the West is out to get us, oh, but we're so tired of this. I mean, when it's going to change and hopefully Trump will do something. So ultimately, in my own experience, and this is just, I mean, I cannot say it's anecdotal because I did have a lot of conversations all over Russia, but I would not think that more than 30% actually want this war to continue, which, by the way, essentially is confirmed by the numbers that Levada Center comes out with. So that's what I've been doing in different places.
And so I put together, I mean, here, the first, I don't even need to explain it, because I myself, like many people, try to understand why reasonably, Russia is not a normal country. Otherwise, it wouldn't be 11 time zones and wouldn't have a double legalist coat of arms, but reasonably functional autocracy as it was, suddenly just fall off the cliff. This certain way. Why would people not fight openly and try to circumvent and kind of adjust to the system? Because this has been a question all the time. Why do they let Putin continue? Why do they not fight? And so that's what I was interested in. So it is kind of explanations as to why there is really no open fights, in addition to very rarely Russians fight openly. I mean, it is always sort of this double speak and double think, and as we say, fig of karmanie, you know, just sort of basically you have your protests behind someone's back, and mockery and sense of humor and so on. Of course, even better question, not the people, I don't know about better, but important question, I actually, in the summer, it was so psychotic that I subscribed to the Telegram channel of the Russian Duma, the Russian Parliament. Anybody's done that? Don't do it. Because it will go crazy very quickly. Because every day they suggest something that you don't think can be actual suggestion from people who, many of them got higher education. And they're actually working in politics, because it is beyond psychotic. And I was sort of trying to understand what drives them to become completely crazy. And you basically experience, when you travel around, those who agree, those who disagree, especially those who say they agree and may not. In the Duma, Zhenya was saying that my book was not just Yeltsin-centric, it was actually, I mean, those of you who read Alexander Solzhenitsyn's, not that I'm that, but the Oak and the Calf, it was pretty much the same. It was commissioned by a publisher, but then the publisher got freaked out that I can be published, because I cannot be published. It was already 2023 and I've already said things, and like, we're not going to publish it. And then Zhenya's colleagues from Echo Moskvy and Dilettant, they said, we're just going to publish it, we don't care. And so they published it. Because one of the portrait that is on the cover of the book is by Nadezhda Khodasevich-Leger, who was the wife of Fernand Leger. She was a very well-known Cubist in her own right, but less known than her husband. So this was a portrait of 1962, when they were going to bring the Cubist exhibit into the Soviet Union, into Moscow. But Nikita Khrushchev was very well known for his, I would say, mildly socialist realist tastes, because I would go much further than its insane realist tastes. And so she thought that she's going to paint him and he would be pleased, and then the exhibit is going to continue. So she painted it, she gave it to him, and he put it next to the wall, but back, the portrait back to the wall. Just too cubist. Even this was too cubist. And my mother wanted it. She said, "Oh, it's such a great portrait. I wanted it." She wanted it, and my grandmother Nina said, "Okay, you can take it. You like everything ostentatious." So this was an ostentatious portrait. And it was interesting because the first publisher decided it wasn't ostentatious. Khrushchev looks good in there. He's not supposed to look good. If we put Stalin everywhere, he's not supposed to look good. So they published it. And in very Solzhenitsyn-like way, the first publisher, the commissioning publisher, called me and said, "We want to publish this book." So I actually have two versions of it. And this is all at the same time why I cannot speak at the Yeltsin Center when, you know, the traditional values, Stalin is being put here. So I actually like to show you some pictures, but just to complete why Duma is going crazy. And that's a very big question, why people are squealing, why people are reporting on each other, why they're so psychotic, why they I think recently there was a story, I'm not good at music. The Queens, right? Queens, is there Queens band, the British band? Queen, sorry, yes, Queens is a borrow. The band, and somebody posted a picture of Queen in drags. I think it was some sort of event. It was a long time ago, and somebody posted to illustrate something. It had nothing to do with values, nothing to do with Russia, nothing. This person was fined, and this person, hopefully not prosecuted, was fined, and for something about traditional values, whatever it is, to value values. And so, of course, the question is, I mean, in the Soviet Union, where there was also a lot of art and films and anecdotes, there are a lot of characters in drag outfits. For example, if anybody remember Gentlemen Удачи, the gentlemen of fortune, when they try to hide from these four thugs, when they try to hide from the authorities, they dress as women. What, you're going to forbid that? And then a quick question was asked, and they said, oh no, it's different. So I was trying.
We're just getting a second microphone so that we can amplify Zhenya as well.
I'm sorry.
Can I show the
No, okay, let's do it, after Nina, we'll do the presentation, okay?
Okay.
We really don't want to do it, so if it takes so much time, then we don't want it.
It's ready? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, go right ahead.
Anyway, so what I was sort of thinking about in 1934, there was a German Hitler politician, Werner Wilkins, and he was talking about sort of the idea was he gave this line, working towards the Führer. And so a lot of those people work towards the Führer. If you ask them, they would say no, they're not doing it. But ultimately, it's their fear, it's their desire to kind of fit into the system. And any country of 11 time zones and the double-headed eagle, it's going to go. Other countries would do that too, but Russia would do it in the most psychotic way. So it is a very psychotic way of doing it. But the reason, I mean, Zhenya, she's talking about going home and she can't. And every time I go, I'm afraid, but I go because what I've discovered, and if you remember, like that, I did it with my own little hands. Big brother is watching you. So if you read George Orwell, Russia is all about George Orwell now. If you read George Orwell, there is a moment where Winston actually can hide next to the screen, and he's heard, but he's not seen, and so he can do more things that he would have if he were observed by the screen. And so a lot of people in Russia is in that space that is not seen by the screen. So the way I call it is a porous Orwell. It's Orwell, but like Golden Dome, as Trump wants to do. So it's Orwell, but there's a lot of holes in it. And sometimes it seems there are more holes in it than non-holes, or sometimes it's the other way around. For example, I found out in Moscow that there is a Russian roulette among young people going on. They go to clubs, and we know stories of people going to clubs and they're raided and their phones are confiscated. So the young kids go to clubs and go to parties, go to restaurants where there's some event going on, and they bet on it. Are they going to be raided or not? I mean, sometimes they leave phone at home. And I was told by a young woman, 25-year-old woman, she said, oh, you can imagine, it was so wonderful. It was the Karchma next to the Kremlin, which used to be, I think, Karchma Shevchenko, but now it is Taras Bulba, but it's Ukrainian, so Taras Bulba is out, so it's Karchma. And so she said it was amazing. For the first hour, the band which was there, they were singing Verka Serdyuchka. Those of you who follow Russian know Verka Serdyuchka is a drag man in drag outfit singing with the female name. Andrei Danilka. And so, and of course, in Russia, he's forbidden. He's obviously Ukrainian, anti-war, and you can go to prison if you actually listen to his songs. And here they were, and for the first 2 hours it was Verka Serdyuchka, and then they went to some patriotic thing. And so I didn't even know that it existed, that you can actually do this porous Orwell in a sense. So I want to show a little bit here, because I made some comparisons. So this is St. Petersburg in 22. The war just began, and people haven't even figured it out. They don't know that it began. And so you see Johnny Depp and all those other things. This is this summer on Arbat. This is in Moscow. And so, of course, we still have departure because you cannot just not have departure. But most of the time, you just always have to have your Arnold. You have to have your subsidy. This is important. But all of these other things is a very these are now more Russian than they ever were, because in 22 you would barely see a Russian actor or Russian important person. In fact, in here, when I came to this person, and I said, so you only have a few Western characters. Why don't you have them? Why don't you have Mao Zedong? No, why don't you have, I think I asked Narendra Modi. And he said, and so are you crazy? If I have Narendra Modi, nobody's going to buy anything. So if you have Barack Obama, people will be buying stuff, but not with Narendra Modi. So this is Stalin. This is new. I took it with my own little hands. This is the Taganskaya square. This woman, I was there for about half an hour looking at people coming in and out, and you could see this is a very, very eager donation to the great Stalin. This is only one carnation thing. There's not that many. But this woman was there for a while, and she does look like she got out of 1950s. I mean, she still looks like she's out of 1950s. But that was sort of the re-Stalinization really has been going on, and that's why, for me, you don't know how much more hatred Khrushchev would get out of the state. As I said, everything is about Orwell, and this continues. I mean, this is really continues. Orwell. Oops, did I say that? Orwell. All of this, and this is my favorite. So this is this summer. What I found out is that in the bookstore, Jenny knows the bookstore. This is Respublika right next to us. The Tverskoy. Right. So this is about 3 versions of Orwell, and this is the Russian Constitution. Because once again, in this porous Orwell, these are 2 most stolen books in bookstores and libraries. And people do joke that this is not a manual for Putin's life. That Orwell wrote a dystopia, not a manual for our life. And the Constitution, in fact, has become a utopian, wonderful thing that you can look at, but you actually don't live by it. And so I love how conscientious Russians are, because they steal both books together. You just put them together and read them together. So this is this year, this is this winter. Books are moved to the 2nd floor, just in case that people start checking. Orwell continues to be present, but also with all the, I mean, one of the most amazing experiences one of the many experiences, one of the interesting experiences is that you go to a shopping mall, nothing is in Russian. And now there's a new law that you're supposed to have everything in Cyrillic. And I asked people in this bookstore, I said, what about Cyrillic? I mean, what's going on? This is all at top 10, top in Russian, but it's still top. Russian doesn't have top. So what is this? And she said, no, we don't care. I mean, it doesn't matter. So all of this is all in English. In fact, they're making a very purposeful effort to kind of show that normal life continues. This is 23. This was the height of militarization, and so this is sort of kind of at the time when, once again, 84. The party told you to reject evidence in front of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. So this is 24. By now, I'll come back to this. oh, here. By now, this one. So this is 26. This is in Novgorod, not the Nizhny Novgorod, not where next to the war, but the original Novgorod, the oldest town in Russia. So this says, victory is in your hurry to become a veteran. And you kind of wonder, is it a trolling? Is it cynicism? Is it patriotic showing off? Or it's all in one thing? And so by now, all of this is completely white noise. It's just completely ignored. So Zhenya mentioned Tula, by the way, is a very military city. This is actually from all my travels. This is the most militaristic city you can imagine. The most militaristic city there is. And I love, Wawrinka right there. So this is Z for as a patriotic Z. So it says for peace, for Russia, for president, for army, and the tank. I'm saying, but for peace, I love when there is a tank for peace, because all tanks really work necessarily to make peace. In that town, it's also the town of gingerbreads. And so most gingerbreads, at least that was in 24, most gingerbreads were in the shape of a gun. Like if you want a gingerbread, just buy a gun, it will be good. So you kind of see how different these places are. What else do I want to say? Oh, that was also a wonderful thing. That's a 23. You have this, and this is also 23. Barbie comes out, and all of this. Barbie's forbidden. You can't show Barbie, but it's shown in a sort of the shadow seance. And at the same time, this is where we live, right next to us. So you have this, you sell insurance for cars in a Barbie thingy. So all of this kind of happening at the same time. What else interesting I wanted to show? And I guess I'll just kind of go closer to the end. This winter was the most horrific experience, and this is where the Orwell with a dome and Orwell with pores exist together. I went there because now you don't have to. This is the Bolshoi, Prokofiev's opera, Son of the Working People. This was when Khrushchev, by the way, when Khrushchev was uniting East and West Ukraine in 1939. Prokofiev was coming back to the Soviet Union. He was a patriotic musician. He wants to please Stalin, so he writes this horrific opera of 3.5 hours. Actually, Google it, and it's beyond. Anyway, but the beyond part is even greater, because this opera is put on stage by the guy who is responsible for projects in the presidential administration. Even in our Soviet times, the apparatchiks were not doing operas. So the operas were Shostakovich, but they were kind of asked to be pro-Stalin, but still they would be musicians doing musical work. So this is the guy who, Sergei Novikov, who is doing this. I went there 3.5 hours. Nightmare from hell.
Korean.
Kirill. From
And
Newyork.
especially the president, the propaganda department.
Yep, he's in charge. He is in charge of public projects. So, but it's not, I mean, the opera is horrible, but the know-how. So most of the time, I just actually wanted to show you the Bolshoi. It's beautiful. It was such a rave of the Bolshoi theater. I'll be done in 5 seconds. So this is 2014, this is 22, and that's what they show the backdrop of while they're singing about Donbass and Donetsk, because all of this was happening in Ukraine, which has always been, oh my God, it's always ours, no, it's theirs, and they want to take it away from us. So all of this, so you're tortured by the music, you're tortured by the story, but then you're also tortured by this. Tremendously tortured by this. So as I said, I went there so you don't have to. So I have to say, I needed another packet of Zoloft right after this, because that was just, I didn't believe that I went there. But I was safe, as always, you are safe. This is the same time, January this year, just last month. And this is in the parking lot. And then reinstated Dmitry Krymov's play. Dmitry Krymov is is a very famous theater director, who now in his performances are still there. That's again Chorus Orwell, Chorus. But it says director, second director, so there's no name of Dmitry Krymov. So this is actually the name of Dmitry Krymov, the performance, and the reason I put Bolshoi next to this one, because this is a parking lot. The tickets to the Bolshoi, they're all on sale. When I was there, half of the seats were empty. Why would you want to go and see the worker's son? It was about $100. And this is the Bolshoi. The Bolshoi tickets are 1,000 plus. This is 250 or 200, perhaps 240. 80-minute performance. You sit in the cold, like you see these people are sitting in but actually also minus 20 degrees outside. And it's packed every night at a show. So once again, you have this horror of the Bolshoi, and you have this life that is normal. And it's not even underground. I think the difference with that and the Soviet Union is that in the Soviet Union, the normal life would be on the table, in the kitchen, at night at the Moscow State University Club. So you know it's all going to get raided. Now it's all at the same time. So the Kremlin says one thing, and people completely live a very different life. Wait. Oh, well, since Zhenya mentioned all of them, this was my most recent trip. And this is to the point that the military operation is not that popular. I mean, it is popular, it's not that popular. Because the governor of Vологdu, and here he is, who's by the way also Kirilenko, they both do not the judo, not the Putin thing, but something else, some other way.
And always topless, right?
So always topless, because the topless is the thing. And so what you discover is that even his special military operation declarations, they are not about that. I mean, he wants it to be the Russian thing. It's the place of power of the Russian world. And you see how megalomaniacal he is, because the streets are not marked. I mean, if you don't know the street, you wouldn't know because it doesn't have names. But look at this. This is all like you would know that he is the governor of that amazing city. And that's him, by the way. So he has a hologram of Stalin in his office. And so every morning he comes in and he shakes Stalin's hand. That's exactly how it works. Even in the Soviet Union, even actually in Russian Empire, Ivan the Terrible didn't have statues because he was too terrible. Well, not now. Here it is. There's one Ivan the Terrible, he just did it, and this is a mural of Ivan the Terrible. Well, of course, they have started. So you go to Wolof, you kind of think, that's it. Russia is finished once again. But then, oops. Then you go to Rybinsk, which is not far away, and that is, I mean, it's in kind of in the name of Andropov, because Andropov was Andropov was the KGB head for many years, then the general secretary of the Communist Party, and kind of a Putin role model in many ways. So they have this KGB secret location bar, but there was nothing about Andropov. They really mock all of this. And I asked them, why would you want to do Andropov? And they said, oh, because it's just funny, because the only way we can downgrade it, we turn it into sort of this capitalist product. But my most favorite, so this is how you enter from the back, and it says the back has, you know, almost naked backside. So cities are different. It depends on who runs them. It depends on who lives there. And very rarely, except for Tula, you really hear, oh my God, let's go. Everything is, you know, needs to be this. My favorite, I love Harry Potter. And I always look for Harry Potter. But also Russia now fights with Satanism. And so it's forbidden because it's apparently an international, what is that? International terrorist or whatever, international something movement. So it's forbidden. And this is all now. This is all when it is forbidden. But this is also, I love this. This is Tula. So Tula, where they have guns and things, they also have an Ollivander shop. This is And this is in the shopping mall. At the beginning, I showed you those little statues with Stalin and Putin. So this was more in museums, kind of official. This is in shopping mall. As you could see, the only Soviet Russian thing in the whole display is Yuri Gagarin. No, well, then, okay, fine. But that's it. Everything else is supposedly forbidden from the State Duma because these are all foreign influences. You're not supposed to have it. This is just now, like literally 3 weeks ago. This is my favorite. I said I would finish this. So this is the McDonald's. Well, now it's not McDonald's on Pushkinskaya. Those of you may remember. The line is insane. And I was like, what happened? I mean, this is summer last year. What happened? And apparently, this is Hello Kitty. They're celebrating Hello Kitty in English. And this is on the road. So Tverskaya is right here. So the Duma people are going right by it where people are celebrating. I asked this patriotic boy, I mean, he's in a Russian flag. So I asked him, I said, what is the line for? And he said, well, everybody needs to have a pink burger. What is a pink burger? And so they sort of laughed at me. The line was insanely long. I came back a few days later when the line was no longer. They had tried the pink burger. Okay, whatever, pink burger. But, so I asked the person who works there and I said, do you have any Russian heroes? And he said, well, we have a pie called Arbat. That's all they have. So, but they were celebrating Hello Kitty. And so my last thing, the war, people do have attitude. They don't display openly. But this is in Переделкино, which Jenny also knows. It says no to war. And they roll this, this is the summer. So they roll this the tree trunk all over. So it's in one place and it is in another place and it is in another place. This is in Yaroslavl, and this was actually a Ukrainian bird that lying there just lying there without fear. And this was my favorite. This is in Murom, and I asked yellow and blue, and I asked the woman who works in that shop. I said, well, isn't it a little dangerous that you have this there? And she gave me a wonderful answer. She said, oh, if somebody comes to check and somebody's going to be upset about it, I'll give them a Marilyn Monroe smile. And I said, oh, don't these colors look so beautiful together?
And that's the colors of the Ukrainian flag.
These are the colors of Ukraine. Okay, so I have more pictures, but we'll just end in there. And then if you ask questions, I can show something.
Very nice. Thank you very much. This is very interesting, and what you just showed to us is just that's the difference between the total regime and the authoritarian. This is authoritarian regime. It's not dictatorship. Because in the Soviet Union, I lived on the Soviets, and of course Nina lived on the Soviets. It was impossible, everything against Soviet regime was only in the kitchen. It was impossible to publish, name of Zoshenko or to say that there were repressions in 1937. So in that respect, it's better than it was, even though now we have about 1,500 political prisoners, whereas in the late Soviet times, in 1980s, before Perestroika, Gorbachev, released political prisoners, but before Gorbachev became the general secretary of the Communist Party in 1985, there was less than 200. So now we have much more political prisoners there, and the kind of the sentences that people get, it's over to 15 years, 20 years. That's the way it was under Stalin, in there. So anyway, so this is very interesting for those who I teach authoritarian regime, so so it's very interesting. Now, Nina, I would like to ask you. You already showed some of these. The well-known Russian anthropologist Alexandra Arkhipova, who now teaches in Sorbonne in Paris. Of course, she had to leave the country. Is collecting a collection of posters by those she calls semiotic partisans. These posters are, as you showed, that's exactly what she calls semiotic partisans. So my question is, and when I was still in Moscow, it was in the summer of 2022, there were even slogans like "Тот сдох и этот сдох." Тот, meaning the guy, Stalin, and this guy is Putin. So that was the reference. He died, and this one will die too. Now, tell me, these pictures of these semiotic partisans production. Did you see it now, or it was from 2022, 2023?
Okay, so this is 24. So only a few months ago, that was the last year. So this is 24. This moves around all the time. The nearby name, Переделкин and this Ростроповича. So Abramovich. So it moves around. This was the Kurskaya, well, I mean, this is not an anti-war, but this was interesting because, so you see this is a person named, and I've never seen anything like that. So the crowd, people go behind him and then they see him and they just go like this. Nobody says, thank you for your service. Oh my God, how are you feeling? Let us help you. And this is 25. So this is actually reasonably, these are reasonably recent. In fact, I couldn't take a picture, but just this winter, in the slaboсть next to us, they were Ukrainian, the three-pronged Ukrainian symbol was on all of those, when you go on the subway, they have those lamps. And so almost every other lamp was with the prong. And I couldn't take pictures because we were supposed to look at it. And all these subway workers were just cleaning them out. And I don't know if they arrested anybody, if it happened, when it happened, but I saw how it was cleaned. So I'm sure it was just before. So people do this all the time. We just don't know enough about it. We only know when somebody's getting caught. We don't know when people are not getting caught. But even, I mean, I also started noticing that even the combination of yellow and blue, because it becomes immediately a question, what do you mean? It already, some people just do it because they do it. But often I was told it because even that is a message. Even, when you have, I don't know, people put garbage cans. I mean, they specifically put blue and yellow together as a message that we know, that we remember. So that happens. But in order for you to see, you actually have to see it. You very rarely kind of have a chance to be a witness to it immediately.
I see. According to the RAND Corporation report, there are 4 major propaganda narratives spread by state TV and state-paid bloggers. 1, denazification, the purpose of the war in Ukraine, denazification, there are Nazis in Ukraine, so which is defending Russia from Ukrainian Nazis. Second narrative, dehumanization. That's present Ukrainians as sort of ethno-national group which is lower in comparison to Russians. Third, I was surprised, to be honest with you, that there is anti-Semitism, that there is once again they blame Jews, but it's here the same, so it's basically what's the difference. Anyway, and the fourth is anti-West rhetoric. So you already showed to us that despite of anti-Western rhetoric, there is a lot of what was called under Stalin as in 1948 when there was the war against cosmopolitans, that was called Western influence, right? So can you confirm that there are these 4 narratives that are promoted on the Russian TV, or it's just reviewed for what?
No, it is. I mean, there's certainly this kind of narratives, and also the life is Western. I mean, and that's why I went to other places, because I find in Moscow, and I don't even call it Western anymore, I just call it normal. when you go to Moscow, when you're in Moscow, fine, but you go to Rybinsk, and in Rybinsk, all these coffee shops and the stores and normal people, even one of the, I mean, the thing about that denazification, all of these narratives, they come and go. It depends on how the front is, I mean, how the war is going. It depends on, what the latest thing of Dmitry Medvedev blog says, whether we're going to be friends with Trump or not friends with Trump. So it all depends. It fluctuates, but yes, most of the time. But one of the things that they do in cities, in the last, I don't know, 20 years, I guess, they put those billboards in boulevards, and so there's the billboards tell a story. So it's not just one, but there's a whole bunch of them along the boulevard, for example. So, and most of them are the children of Donbass, or the truth behind Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, or the truth behind war with Finland and Stalin's war with Finland and something. But recently they started being much more, I mean, it's one of the things in today, and that's why TV is there and life is here. And that's why it was such, I mean, as you said, it's not totalitarians, it's authoritarians. It's already very scary authoritarians, but it's still authoritarian because life is still possible.
There's no ideology.
Right, no, I mean, and that's why they're working so hard on this traditional values. So they really push it, but that's why I thought it was so important to show pictures where life is normal. And actually there was an accident, not an accident, sort of a joke that I have sometimes with my friends. When I go there, we sit in a coffee shop, because Alexander Dugin keeps saying that we need to grow potatoes and our own vegetables, and then we're going to come back to the soul and something. And you see all this incredibly well, normally dressed young people with blue hair, which is, by the way, I think soon enough is going to be a crime. And so that she Williams, what do you think she's going to grow? Like potatoes. Oh, and this is tomatoes, and this is asparagus. So it's completely divorced from any normalcy. So they push the narrative. And it does translate, and that's why I actually opened this, because in addition to the Western part, there's also this Russification. I don't know how to make it work. Oh,
If you go back
yeah.
to the previous slide and then you start this slide over. I have nothing. I know.
So this is fake. This is not real people. And this is an ad for if you marry, you can have your wedding like this. And it's become incredibly popular. So you see all this headgear, which of course in our time with Zhenya, this was the sort of the state thing going, we did not pay attention. But now it's very popular because people play with it. And so one of the
You mean with Russian?
with the Russian,
dresses?
right, with the Russian
Yes,
headgear.
for dresses.
In Vologda, I went to whatever it is, the gift shop. And the woman with great disdain, there was all this kapushniki, the headgear, the whole bunch of them. And I said, well, you have a lot of them. She said, oh. And I said, are they being bought? And he said, oh my God, they're buying them all the time. And then they're like idiots, go to the square and just in them, they're putting them on their heads. And this is completely ridiculous, all this fake nationalism, she said. And this is just the woman who sells gifts in Vologda. And so people, I mean, it's such a Russian thing that you say one thing, you act another, you live in something else. So they do have that, but it goes and people translate it in any different ways. And so in some ways, for example, I don't know how to click on this. Can you click on this? So I don't know, yeah, I didn't remember her from the 80s, Nadezhda Kadышeva, do you remember her? I don't. Radiation light, that's Easter. You can use more Russian than that. But this is the
And she told them the whole age.
Yeah.
She's going, and she wasn't even that funny. She was full of coffee, but nobody cares about all of this. In Nigeria. But look at the husband. I mean, that husband. Wow, really? Because this is not a Russian outfit. I mean, clearly. So I just wanted to show you.
And channel 5.
Yeah, this is the.
It's what I do it. No?
Palace Square in Santiago.
Yeah.
I mean, you can find it online. But the point is that it becomes, all of this becomes a performance. I mean, all this, so when they do the traditional, the whatever, it becomes, it's like, you want traditional, here it is. These are your Soviet desserts, the way they were in the 50s. So there's little matryoshki and horses and things and that.
And that's chocolate, right? This is chocolate.
This is, no.
Ah, no?
This is the Olympic Games.
Ah.
And so you just put together all these things that you, in your own capitalist way, you basically pretend that you follow all these claims of nationalism. But they do go psychotic. I mean, I have to say, I repeat this word all the time, when I was previously with Jamie at Harvard, I was showing another slide, I just deleted it because now it seems old. So they did an exhibit, which is called Russia, the Country of Opportunities, and the VDRK, which was the Stalin built in 1930s Stalin built exhibition complex. And so it was so wonderful. It was such a monument to Putin. So they moved it, and now it's a permanent thing. And so they keep, those who study the Soviet Union may remember Общество знания, which is the sort of the knowledge organization, which is another thing. I mean, they keep reinstating all this crap from the Soviet Union and try to fill it with a new meaning, which was already Potemkin village then, but now it's a Potemkin village of a Potemkin village. So before it was a simulation, and now it's a simulacrum, which basically has zero relations to reality. But anyway, recently, just a few weeks ago, one of the ideologists, the main ideologist out there, Alexander Kharichev, had a graph. He showed everybody, should put it in here, showed everybody a graph. Western values, Russian values, and they all kind of in circles. So 100%, 40%, 80%. Life, according to Western values, is 90%. I think it's wonderful. In Russian values, it's 40. Because patriotism and unity, that's 90. But all this crap like humanity and life. So yes, they do this. And that's how they treat people. And I think that's why people don't go back to mine. That's why they don't protest openly, because Yuri Lotman, the great philosopher from Tartu University many years ago, he called it a paradox of tyranny. You kind of tolerate the worst despots in history because you're afraid that the end result is going to be even worse. But that's why when you could see that putting this all together, that's why I got depressed, because my brain was, you have to be very Russian to be able to put it together in one brain, because one brain cannot contain the disparity of this, of these experiences. So they do that, but they are there and life is here. And I think it's getting closer. And I think people, if, thought сдохнет, if a human сдохнет, then it's going to be less and less of normal. But there is still, and that's why I keep going, because I want to see, I don't want to see it, but I want to see how it's not yet the end and full dictation.
Volodu is sort of, the nationalistic capital of Russia. That's the country where, Vasily Belov lived, the famous Russian nationalist writer, and many acts. But what about Rybinsk? It's Yaroslavskaya, okay, gubernia. It's a little bit different. You were Ekaterinburg or Moscow. Are they these nationalistic stances the way they are in Vologda, or
I didn't see it.
You didn't.
I didn't see it. I mean, it is, but what was amazing about Rybinsk, and actually I have to say I'm a big fan now. And first of all, I went there because Andropov was there. He studied there. He had his first killings of KGB, not KGB, he wasn't KGB, but one of the people responsible for purges there as well. I didn't see anything because another thing about cities, for example, Smolensk is a beautiful city. I don't have a picture here, but it was like you get there and you see how people just hoping to get through this and to keep the city as wonderful as it is. I mean, it does say it's the last city, always the last city where the Nazis were turned away or somebody else, all the enemies are turned away. But it used to be, I mean, for 5 minutes, it's also really interesting to see the cities that for 5 minutes were Poland or Lithuania or something. Because they do have this an entirely different outlook of things. They're more Western than, say, Moscow. There, they, for example, in Smolensk, the only thing they have, they put all the soldiers, are you a volunteer for the war, on the buses, and that's it. So basically, they negotiate with the state or negotiate with people who are going to come and control them that we did this, don't touch us, don't just get out of our way. And that's why I thought Tula was so interesting because they voluntarily put all of this on. Other cities, you can have a Z in Yaroslav, you have a Z, but that's all they have. So we have that, get off our backs. In Rybinsk, there was nothing. There was no Z, there was no war poster, there was absolutely nothing. And the reason and then I started my research, and the reason I think there is nothing is because they have a lot of potentially and not potentially military related factories and think tanks and places that they used to make, I think they used to make, whatever it is, for the planes. Wings, thank you. But somehow it's related to some military thing. And so they're not touched. And this is not a big city, it's 170,000 people. And so nobody's touched because most of the cities working in relations to this. So they don't have to do any of the war pretense. And when I was talking about those posters that tell a story, in Rybinsk, I mean, I didn't put pictures there because it was minus 25 and horrible blizzard, and so it was all basically covered. But even there, it's different because their story is told the great Russians who became famous in the West. So they twisted that because they were supposed to do all the great Russians and we are and whatnot. And so they did the great Russians who became famous elsewhere, in Europe, in Switzerland, in America. And so that does tell you, and it's a lot of psychology for the city, and I don't know how many people have patience for that, but if I don't do it, I mean, even for myself, if I don't do it, I feel like Russia should just go into the dustbin of history because it's violent, doesn't have humanity, reacts to things in a way that should not be. And so I collect the stories that show that there is hope for it. And in the cities you see, not in Tula, in the cities you see that there is a lot of hope for it. I mean, maybe I'm too optimistic, but that's what I saw in most cities.
Tula is a strong point of the military industrial
Yes,
complex.
exactly.
It's always been, and the guy who was the governor was one of the Putin's bodyguards. The Russian authorities are intensively blocking the internet. People are prohibited, at least from what I read, and from what I speak to a lot of people in Moscow, people are prohibited from searching for extremist content and advertising VPN services. Roskomnadzor, the censorship agency, under the guise of countering criminals, has restricted calls via Telegram, WhatsApp, and for instance, when I talk to my close ones in Moscow, they have to use VPN in order to use WhatsApp. Signal is working more or less, you can use it without, it depends upon the time of the day, it depends upon the day. But GPS, there is no GPS in Moscow anymore, and it's impossible to even, Yandex maps, they don't work in Moscow. You have to use paper maps. Russians, as I understand, they were used to use, this max messaging, the invention, the Russian invention of, that is, they're forced to put it on their cells. State Duma has mandated that all residential group chats in the Russian regions should be VMS. In December, Roskomnadzor blocked the Roblox gaming platform, yes, for justifying extremism, terrorism, inciting violence, and of course, queer propaganda. And so, from your, I understand that, it's anecdotal evidence, but still, do people feel like, they're annoyed that there's restrictions on internet? Did they tell you that, Putin goes too far, we're becoming China or anything like that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not even anecdotal. I mean, it is true. Until this summer, I would only use VPN when I had to watch YouTube, for example. But now you have to have it all on all the time. I don't know how you keep saying, you keep telling me that Signal works. Signal doesn't work. I think they blocked it.
No, I speak with
I'm
each morning. So
Okay, but in many people's cases, Signal is also gone. No, it's all there, but that's what that's why I subscribed to the Duma channel, because I just wanted to see how far the crazy goes, and the crazy goes very far, including Max, and people do feel this all the time, and they talk about it all the time, and even their own. Have you ever heard of Katerina Mizulina? Okay, wonderful woman. I have to say, awesome. I mean, awesome. In love, married now, to basically a boy who acts as Sounds of Music. Remember his name was, what was it? Shaman, right, but in Sounds of Music, 1960, whatever. It was, I think, Kurtz, yes, Kurtz. And so when I first saw Shaman on a poster, I was, wow, that's Kurtz, but instead of the Nazi flag, he just has a Russian flag on it. It's the same thing.
And he sang this famous I am Russian.
I am Russian, yes. And by the way, he's not unlike Kadышeva, who works hard at the age of 80. He doesn't actually even gather people enough viewers at his concert, because he's completely fake. And he, as many say now, if anybody's LGBT, it's him. And so this woman who fights LGBT is married to this guy. But the reason I mentioned her, I mean, she has a lot of exploits to her name. But when the Max was introduced in the summer, and that's why I said, like, it felt like Russia just fell off the cliff. WhatsApp was forbidden. I mean, you can't call on WhatsApp, the Telegram and whatnot. Mizulina spoke in Duma and said, oh my God, it deprives people of freedom. And what I mean by people of freedom is that now, when I can no longer use this, I cannot squeal anymore, because her main job is to search for people who break the law and then report on them. So she couldn't squeal. So she actually spoke for the people's rights. So the point is, yes, it's all there. It's all psychotic. People are all annoyed and pissed, if I may say so. But once I also mentioned, it's like boiling the frog, and it's like tightening the straitjacket. You can't do it all the way, but if you could do it a little bit, and then a little bit, and then a little bit, and people keep thinking, I can survive that. I can live with that. And by the so until next time, I am going to live through this. And so the question is, what is the next time? When can you actually break and say, I cannot tolerate it anymore, I'm going to go on the Kremlin, or I'm not going to go on the Kremlin, I'm just going to die. I'm going to die behind it. But all of this, exactly, and that just goes back to my point, that's why I got depressed when I was writing, because putting this all together, a normal country, and in a country that lives like a normal country, outside of all these messages of Nazification and whatnot, cannot have that at the same time. Because Stalin had that, but Stalin, there was no normal life. That's all they had. But now there is a normal life, and the crazy that only happened, it didn't even happen. And Zhenya said in Brezhnev, they were 3 times less political prisoners. In Khrushchev, who came after, I mean, not defending him in any way, there was a lot of political prisoners, but he came after Stalin. There was still, I think, 5,000 political prisoners. So you can't, that cannot be together. We've never, I mean, I don't think we historically, and of course there is Iran where both sides, but in such an open, absolutely parallel way, functioning or not functioning for everybody to see, this is something that will go into history books as incomprehensible oral.
A good friend of mine, who in fact is sitting in this here, he gave me as a present this book. It's the biography of Pasolini. Pasolini is a famous Italian director of 1960s, 1970s, this new Italian cinema. Anyway, and he was a queer person. So that's what was translated and published in Moscow. That's how it went out of the. Rory, do you remember that you gave it to me? Yes, you did. Thank you. Right. Yes. So anyway, that's how it came out of the publishing house. Just one sec. Sorry. Anything that, as far as I understand, is connected to queer or anything like that.
Wow.
That's the way it came out of the publishing house. Now in Russia, the very famous Russian writers like Akunin, like Ulitskaya, those who used to sell Bessa, they're totally prohibited. They're banned. You cannot buy Akunin anymore. Nina, you went to Republica. Did you see any books by Akunin or any books? You did.
Until 23, in fact, I did this research. I went, there was Bykov, there was Akunin, there was everybody.
Bykov also forbidden.
Right. And so I asked a saleswoman, I said, I found Akunin, there was Ulitskaya, everybody was there. And I said, I cannot find Bykov. And she said, oh, I'm sorry, I think he was sold out. So that was 23. And of course, by 24, when they became undesirable and terrorists and whatever they were, of course not. And that's why I had a slide in Respublika, the books were pushed upstairs. So the books were on the first floor because it's a bookstore. So what are you going to have? You have to have bookstores. I mean, you have to have books. Now all the books were pushed to the second floor. And when I was talking to a saleswoman there, I said, why do you have books on the second floor? And she said, well, some idiot is going to come in, spraverka, he's going to come and check. So he's not going to climb upstairs. So we just put all the books up there. But that's what I mean. I mean, the first floor is dedicated to diaries. And it does say diary. It doesn't say blocknote. It says diary. Then it has candles. And it says candles, in case you don't understand that there's a Russian switch. Right, but there's nothing in Russian, and that's my point. So they make it, and people, and I had a slide there, people hide there, just sit there in a coffee shop. In a wonderful coffee shop. In this space, they look at books, they go to the second floor, they bring the book down, and they spend the whole day. So people spend time in bookstores. Because in Respublika, you wouldn't know that there is Putin, you wouldn't know there is war, you don't know there is no West, you just wouldn't know that. Same thing happens in many museums. People go to museums, Gazdva, which is open in 2020, and was actually done by the decoration was done by an Italian architect studio, and so people go there and stay there because that's where all this Nazi, this and that does not exist. Amazing thing, there's an unbelievable place, and I wish you could, don't go to the Bolshoi, but if there is a chance, go to the Музей толерантности, which is a museum of tolerance, which in Russia today sounds like a total oxymoron. What is the Museum of Tolerance? Which is exactly. that is an unbelievable place. Once again, people go there for the whole day. They have wonderful exhibits. And there is a kind of not an order, but an order to have Soviet or Russian connected things, the patriotic things. So the Soviet and the exhibit was on Soviet women directors. At the time when now, especially women and girls, they're supposed to produce children at the age of 14 and get money and basically demographically encouraged. So they do have an exhibit on women directors. How do they do that? One of the women directors in Soviet history, in 20th century history, was the woman who, Tatiana Lyoznova, who did 17 Moments of Spring. 17 Moments of Spring with Stirlitz, who was a Soviet colonel, but then he became a German.
Well, the Soviet side,
Right,
and that's
right.
the documented movie that Putin loved the most.
Well, he loved he loved this the shield and the sword, but he loved that too because he wants to be tall and beautiful. Because the actor in this film is tall and beautiful, so that's what Putin wants. And so what do? They just put this, and who is going to say no to the 17 мгновений весны? Nobody's going to say no to the 17 мгновений весны. And so it is an amazing exhibit of women like Shapitka and all other women. And so once again, I mean, the state is spending billions. This is the state that has no money because it's losing money on oil and all of this. Billions of pushing max, of forbidding VPNs, or forbidding this, because the greatest thing to know about Russia is that it will not have money for anything. For KGB, they will always find. I mean, I use KGB as a collective term. So they spend a lot of time for the money for this. But also the people, as they were in our times, found incredibly creative ways to fight it. Once again, please forgive us. Russians do not fight directly, or very rarely fight directly, but they still fight.
I think it's time to give opportunity to the audience, to ask your questions. So please, okay, please.
So
Yes.
I am Camilo. I am from Davis Center. I'm a business scholar there at Harvard, and I have
Where are you from originally?
from Brazil. Yes,
Okay.
but I study Russia, and so I have many questions to ask you, but I will restrain myself only to two. And as you did, I've been to Russia since the beginning of the war 3 to 4 times, and I spent 3 months there each time. And I'm also curious about what's going on in Russian society. Although my research is about 19th century Russia, but anyway, it's impossible not to be touched by this. And my 2 questions are: about your experience of talking to people about what's going on, how difficult it is to squeeze people to talk to you about the war? Because in my experience, when I start talking about this with my friends, people from universities, my hosts there, they are afraid even to use the word war till today. So they use, for example, международные мероприятия, for international events and so on. And how difficult it is to transform these conversations into science, into papers. So to have a method, because I'm thinking about this in my own academic life. The second question is about the museums. You talk too much about theater, cinema, music. I'm also interested in these topics, but last time I was there, it was last winter, and I was astonished by the amount of new museums and exhibitions they have, not only in Moscow, but around Russia. I visit more than 30 cities in Russia, and they have now, in each regional capital, they have a museum SPO. In Moscow, for example, they have an exhibition called Обновленный Nazism, in order to explain people which kind of Nazism they have in Ukraine now. They have an exhibition also in Moscow called Nazism, in order to explain the relationship between the NATO and Nazism, and many others. First, I can start with Россия моя история. I'm sure that you know these big exhibitions they have in Den Haag.
Well, that's what I mentioned, right?
Yes. So
There was no war in there. I mean, there was a war, but not the way you.
but as a historian, I see that they changed the history there, even when they talk about the ancient
Yeah.
Russia.
Okay,
So
And
how
the question
was-
is,
yeah, the question is,
so the first point about the interviews,
Yes, sir.
and the second question is, what was your experience with
right,
this
okay,
museum?
got it,
Yeah.
all right.
these are not museums, that's exposition.
Yeah, this
What
is
we are
a-
talking about, it's not museums.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I will answer. So, I actually, I mean, once again, it depends on what you go for. If you go for to collect information of how SWO is being, special military operational war is being represented, I'm sure you'll find it. My my interest is to, I mean, I see it anyway. So I actually want to see normalcy. I want to see that has not, this archipelago has not covered completely. So yes, it is there. I went actually in, I forgot which city, I don't remember anymore. I disagree. I don't think, at least in my experience, it's not in every city. The special military operation exhibit, operation museum, it's in some cities, it's not in every city, at least in my experience. And in one, forgot which city, they said that I need to show passport in order to get in. And so I was like, I don't think I want to be documented going into that museum. Once, I mean, it is for, they have to do it. Some probably do it voluntarily. They get money for this. In Russia, a lot of these things are used in order to launder money, which is exactly what's happening there. So it's probably less patriotism, more than because the state tells you, and some of it is people who are interested. In terms of, and to this, as you said, NATO, something, I just wouldn't go. I mean, I would go to one, but I wouldn't go to all of them. For me, it's enough. And I went to this Russia, the VNH, and I actually, after I was there for about 3 hours, and then I had to sit down because the amount of stuff is, basically it's a Putin story. The way I have very easy time talking, but I also probably, because I'm Russian, because it's my native language, if I see that somebody doesn't want to go that far, I just don't go. I use some other things. I mean, for example, I was in Kostroma, which is a fantastic city, and I was, there's some guards, and I was next to the church, and I wanted to see, because in churches sometimes they do have icons with the war, and you also want to see how much they invested in it. So I wanted to see, and the guy said, go this direction, and so I just became incredibly religious. I became incredibly religious, and I said, oh my God, I traveled all the way from Moscow to your wonderful cathedral, and you are not letting me in, and I just embarrassed him to death. And she let me in, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, no, I'm glad, we just, So, and then he said, we have to be vigilant because the war is going on, so that this guy is patriotic. But then there's some babushka in the church, and she says, oh, I'm so glad that, normal people come in. So it all depends on how you are, but also for you, it's academic research. For me, it's my life and also academic research, but much less academic than my life. So we would just have different approaches to this.
yes, please.
Yeah, should I stand?
No.
Okay, yeah, my name is Susan Smith-Peter, I teach at College of Staten Island. This is really interesting, thank you for the talk, I appreciate it. Well, you're saying, how can it be possible that these two things are happening at the same time? And actually, it's just sort of a postmodernism where you have these multiple discourses that are going on at the same time. And Dugin, you mentioned Dugin, he is all talking about postmodernism or something. So, I mean, you can have postmodernism and people can have these multiple narratives, but it doesn't really change anything. Right? Rybinsk, they're doing this, they're not pushing the narrative of the war, but they're producing the planes that are used to bomb Ukrainians. So I guess my question is, does it really matter that they're doing these sort of postmodern skirmishes and putting the rocks with the colors? I mean, if the machinery of the war is still working, do these kind of postmodern
Well, I mean, okay, well, it's a physical life with physical people, with physical realities that are happening, so maybe it doesn't matter. But then what does matter at all? Nothing matters. We go to protest against death in Minnesota and Trump is still president. Does it matter? Do we go to protest against Minnesota and Trump is still president? So yes, we do live in all these multiple postmodern formulas. What I'm saying it's not possible is because the divorce of those formulas is so grand, although a good friend of mine, a wonderful writer, Ian Buruma, has written a lot of books on kind of Nazi Germany and Berlin in 1945. And so when I tell him the stories, he says it's exactly like it was in Berlin in 1945. Probably, I don't know, maybe it is. He studied it, I didn't. Maybe it is, but then, what, so do we then live in physical reality and postmodern? All these realities are together and yet, and they may cancel each other, but that's how I began my presentation, is that this is not enough, the bombs are flying, and yet there is life continues, and yet there are people painting Ukrainian birds of freedom in a state-sponsored cathedral in Yaroslav. If you don't think it matters, it's your view. I think it matters tremendously, because I would feel much worse if there would be only bombs and nothing else was happening.
I think you mentioned that there was an increase in anti-Semitism in official narratives. Did I understand correctly?
No, I was citing the Red Corporation report.
Okay, then maybe I should look up that report, and that would,
It's Red Corporation report, yes.
okay.
Published in May 2025.
Okay, so then I'll condense the question to, if that's the case, then why do you think that's happening? If that's-
I can, this is
Okay.
one question for me. I don't notice it, but once again, and
I also was surprised to be honest with you.
No, I'll look it up on my own, and if I'm asked a completely different question, maybe continuing in her question, it's fashionable these days to talk about the new F word, fascism. So we're not going back to the 1930s, but is it fair to describe what's happening now in Russia as a postmodern evolution of fascism?
well, people have done that.
Yeah.
So if you look at traits, probably yes. But I'm very careful with fascism. I'm very careful with F word. And also actually anti-Semitism, the Jewish Museum, Center of Tolerance, it is still there. It's completely packed. They have a lot of exhibits. I understand that for you it feels very small. When I go there, I look for the small things because hopefully one day they will turn into something else. That's how it was happening during the thaw. There would be a theater opened and some protest happening, a play written and so on. So hopefully for that. So, I mean, yes, but as I said, very careful. And the reason I'm careful also is we have Stalinism. I mean, look, that's horrible. And it's horrible in its own right. And now, I mean, modern authoritarianism, Jamie is teaching a course, I teach a course now on authoritarianism. I think they're all basically now intertwined. It's very difficult, unlike before when it was sort of, this is fascism, this is Nazism, this is Stalinism. It's very difficult to do it. So now it's all intertwined. But yes, I mean, this is a repressive regime. It's not a totalitarian yet, but it's a repressive regime, and it has many elements of different repressive regimes, including fascism.
Yes, please. Yes.
Thanks so much for this beautiful speech. I've seen so many cities I've been to, including Toshok, one. So it's so much hope in your presentation that people want to say something, but they cannot. They're afraid. But do you think most of the people don't care? Because when I ask my friends what people do talk about war, they answer me they don't talk. They don't care. And when we talk about war, we just care about bombs. We care about like kids and kill people and destroy cities. But when Russian people, not all of them, but many of them talk about war, they care not about war like crisis, like a visa issues,
Mhm.
like inflation, and when you show us the slide saying stop the war, no war, нет войне, we mean like stop the war, like some like discuss it what happened, and Russian people like many of them think just forget it, just stop the war, back our visas back, please internet, no VPN anymore, and just forget it. So not
Yeah, no, yes, absolutely.
good thing is an issue, so
Well, I mean,
uh,
once again, I mean, Russia is a big country. Let's remember it's the largest country in the world.
I'm from
Okay.
Irkutsk region,
Well,
so
there you
yeah.
go. So, okay, it's not monolith. It's a lot of it is different. And but here, that's why I actually put here. So anger and apathy, the more militancy is pushed to the top, the more ignored and resented it is from the bottom. So people, the more you push this whole narratives of demilitarization, that just get out. Absolutely, and that's exactly why I started my talk or whatever presentation with an apology, saying it's not enough. Whatever the normalcy is not enough. However, it is there. But absolutely, people don't want to know. They don't. When I was in, where are you from? Irkutsk, you said.
Bratsk.
Graz. Oh,
That's
no,
like-
that's a place. I was in Omsk. I was in Omsk 3 years ago, and because there was a St. Petersburg, the Hermitage Museum that was in Omsk, one of the affiliates. And I met a woman who was in the wardrobe checker, and she was telling me that her son Ilyusha was a wonderful son, and he just served the country, and he got a medal from Putin, and he got money, and he took them to Crimea for a vacation, and so on and so forth. But very proud. And then, so when I got out, a friend who has known this woman worked with her. She said that 2 years ago, a year ago, this boy was in prison from the age of 15, so he's now 29. He was a horror of the family. They just couldn't know how to deal with him and whatnot. So and so they would find an excuse in all of this. Some people would think we don't want to deal with it at all, but a lot of people do want to deal with it, and that's why that's what I collect. I collect stories and evidence that there are still people who care. Maybe it's irrelevant, and maybe he's going to live until 150 and we all die, and it will end badly. But then. Yes, Kirill.
Hello, so thank you for the talk. Three questions. Speaking of the size of the country, I know this time that you went to the European part of Russia, but have you done any research before or spoke to anyone about the differences, how this so-called patriotic narrative is promoted in Muslim majority republics or Buddhist majority republics? Because I don't think that Bogati or Orthodox icons would resonate with people in Chechnya or Kazakhstan and so on and so forth. The second question is about different narratives. I was also in Russia, but in the summers in Petersburg, Tula, and Moscow. In Moscow, I felt that there were like two of these narratives. I also saw this billboard, but I also saw something different. Jam festivals, theater festivals, huge embarkment that opened in Kolomens, and I remember this chill, yoga, and so on and so forth. So I felt that the government in Moscow, just because these festivals were organized by the city council. But it was kind of, they were trying to project the normality of life. So in that sense, Moscow stands out. Would it be the case? How would you conceptualize that?
No, I think you're completely right. And actually, Zhenya and I talked about it when I was asking her if I should send pictures, or she would feel very homesick, and I did. And so Zhenya asked, so who's doing all this? And Sobyanin, because Sobyanin was the mayor of Moscow, he was very criticized for kind of doing the normalcy. And he said, well, people have to feel, even in war, people have to feel normal. Because Sobyanin, once again, like in Smolensk, like in Rybinsk, he just wants to get through this. They're afraid to fight, but he wants to get through this. So yes, this is absolutely, and with all this anti-Western stuff, there was an incredible exhibit of Alice in Wonderland, all Russian editions of Alice in Wonderland, in the Literary Museum in Moscow, just opened. So with all the pushes of, oh, we're not going to have any of this, it was a fantastic exhibit. So yes, absolutely, the narratives, but that's what I mean. I mean, they're all parallel and kind of not congruous at the same time. What was your first question you said?
About different narratives in national
In
republics.
national republics. I mean, I cannot tell you because I only went to Tatarstan, I only went to Kazan. And their president, I mean, he's not president anymore, he's still being president, right? He's trying very hard, very war-oriented. We are the first. But once again, if you're war-oriented, you're just doing, I mean, the look, I don't know, I was a visitor for 3 days, I don't know. But anybody I talked to in a cab, just forget the war. It is so tiring and it's horrible. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So you go to the main square, so they have their own Lambat, the pedestrian street. And they have this, once again, this collection of billboards with the Tatarstan people at the war, Tatarstan people at the war. And the whoever with a Tatar name, he hit the Ukrainian drone and he hit the plane and blah, blah, blah. So the whole thing's gone. And at the end, it says, and here is how to become a hero of the special military operation. And that last billboard is written all over it with curse words. The Russian is good, but curse words. And a lot of it is just as if somebody was hitting it and hitting holes in it. It could be random. I don't know, but that's what basically you come in and you see. So all the stories, and then there's a lot of mud right around it. They have a theater, very famous, apparently, the Kachalov Theater. And the director of he's a local, he's a Tatar. And so he was saying, oh, we are going to have SWOR name on the theater until the last day of SWOR. Okay, good for you, congratulations. So I go to the theater, there's no SWOR. I read all about it. I wanted to see, I wanted to take pictures. There's no SWOR. I go into the theater and they have actually the marriage of figurative. Yeah, that's very patriotic. I mean, that's really incredibly patriotic. Marriage of Figaro. And so I asked the coat check woman, I said, so where was your SWOR on the top? I said, oh, I think I know, so it just burned out. The first thing my head is, so what happened? Who cares? And so I don't know what it means. I mean, are they patriotic? Are they just basically being this randomly chaotic Russians? But so he promised, he gave this thing, and he announced it, and there were articles written. And then it's like, okay, and who cares? We don't care about it anymore. So it's, and where in Buryatia, I know I haven't been, so this is not my own experience, but where the coffins are coming from, a lot of coffins are coming from there. I spoke to a friend who was there, and she said there's absolutely no support for this because they feel like they already did their job, and they were promised it fast. They promised they will get the money, get out, will be over, and it's not over, and they continue to be harassed, and so it's different way of approaching it. Good. Yes, of course.
Thank you for this fantastic talk. Since you're talking about a population that's been marinating in propaganda to various degrees for a decade and a half, what are your hopes or predictions for if and when the propaganda loosens, recedes? What do you think will happen, would happen, if there were to be a freer information environment?
I don't know. I mean, I don't think Russia has ever been in this situation, because even in Stalin, where there was greatest propaganda and greatest repressions, in many ways, Russia during the one empire, Soviet empire, so it still was moving forward. There was a very wrong idea of progress, but it was an idea of progress. You were supposed to get more industrialized. You were supposed to have, absolute monarchy turns into constitutional monarchy. Of course, Russia always does it with a hammer and the nail and the kuvalda, but nonetheless, this is, at least in my experience and what I've studied, this is the concerted effort to de-industrialize Russia, to de-educate, de-science. So it's all so the way even the education now system is going to be structured is that it's going to create is going to create material for. It's not really people who are thinking, it's not those who are going to win Nobel Prizes, it's going to be material for. And I don't know how that is going to be unraveled. Can you unravel that? How by the time тот умер, и этот тоже сдохнет, by the time maybe it would be total Orwell. It was not going to be even 1984, it's going to be Animal Farm. And so if it is an Animal Farm, can you actually get out of the Animal Farm? So I don't have an answer to this. My only hope, and once again, I feel I'm a Russian, I shouldn't be optimistic in any way, and hopeful. But when I was writing this book, my final conclusion, not in the book, but sort of what I learned from writing it, is that for every Stalin, there is a Khrushchev. And that is my hope, that for every Brezhnev, for every Andropov, there is a Gorbachev. That has been like that. It doesn't mean it's going to be again, but potentially.
Yes, please.
Do you have any special privileges there, being the granddaughter?
No.
Okay.
Nothing more. We probably have time, for two more questions, so, yes, please.
So there is obviously this attempt to kind of reframe.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, is that too loud or should I?
No, that's good.
Fantastic. Do I introduce myself or? Hi,
Yes.
I'm Rebecca. I'm getting a master's in politics, but not in this building. So I was curious, like kind of off the idea of privilege, like in the idea of the recontextualization of Russia's past. Have there been any movements to take advantage of other people who have ties to prominent people in Russia's history to kind of use them as a mouthpieces of the government? Or have there generally been attempts to kind of distance them?
Well, I mean, it's not just about the war, because somebody said to me a long time ago when Putin just became Putin, that he loves names. Putin loves names because he's a poor boy from not the outskirts, but
So it's about cloud, about
from the right. So he loves culture, he loves names and culture. I myself saw him like a boy in a candy store. It was 2004 when he was in the presence of, well, not in the presence, he was with Galina Vishnevskaya and Rostislav Rostropovich. I mean, I've never seen a man or a woman that happy in my life. He was with these two icons of dissidentship, and now he's their host. Oh my God. So he loves names. And Gagarin's daughter is working, I don't know if she's still working, she was in charge of the Red Square Museum. So I think there have been attempts, but I don't think now it matters that much, because now they're really set on whatever ideology they need, they're going to have it. It's not about the names anymore. So the right name may have very wrong ideas, and that's what they're more interested in. But originally he was very big on names.
Oh, and I had one more, if that's great. So was 1984 censored at all? Do they ever rewrite the text of these books that end up, or they just redact them?
Pardon me?
Well, after seeing the redactions in the book.
No, that's very different. That's what's so shocking also, that 1984 is in every store. It's not redacted, it's not on the forbidden list. And it's not changed at all. It absolutely, no, this is, I mean, they have specifics. And in fact, those publishing houses, and not just this one, they do this. And there was actually even a piece by a New York Times reporter who went to Moscow on purpose and interviewed those publishers, and they told him that is an act of defiance. So we're actually even leaving the evidence of that period. No, and that's why I mean, it's like Orwell should be forbidden first. And from then on, everything else, and forget Akunin, who cares? Orwell should be forbidden first. No, it's not. I mean, you buy it everywhere.
Like, why not?
And I didn't show it, but so I went to Ashan, which is sort of the Walmart of Moscow. There are 4 versions of Orwell, like 4 versions. One is not enough. You just buy different Orwells.
They have the experience of, post-Soviet experience.
Mhm.
All the books, Solzhenitsyn was prohibited, at some point Zochenko was prohibited. I'm not one when I started writing, being a journalist, Anna Akhmatova was prohibited. Requiem was prohibited, anyway, everything was prohibited. And then perestroika happened, and all these books just came out. And then, they keep coming, Zamyatin, all this, the entire, immigrant literature that we never known about, we just never heard about these names. Berbera was published. And then they saw that, in fact, it changed very little. And apparently, when these books were prohibited for Orwell, in my time when I was a young reporter, for 1984, it was distributed only on the tobacco paper, and for having Orwell, you could get 7 years in labor camp. So, but people read this, and apparently all these books they didn't have we expected this to have a profound impact on people. People read Solzhenitsyn, Archipelago Gulag. They read Anna Prebaum wrote an amazing book on Gulag, much better than Solzhenitsyn. I mean, 10 times more better than Solzhenitsyn. So what? Apparently, it's we probably tend to give too much weight. I'm sorry, but I'm afraid that we tend to think for us it's important, right? But I read a lot of 19th century now, and we know what was happening in Russia in the 19th century, and I'm reading, and in the late 19th century, early 20th, Kuprin, Bunin, people read this. It was published, and then 1917 happened, and then the Civil War happened, and then 13 million people were killed during the Civil War. So anyway, unfortunately, I think we tend to exaggerate, the role of books. Sometimes, somebody said that, that Russian reformers were more Marxists than Marx himself. So anyway, any last question? Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks very much for this talk. I actually have a question from my partner who lives in Moscow, who's texting now. He wanted to ask, you've lived through the Soviet Union, the late Soviet Union, and now you've seen what the situation is like in Russia today. Do you see any comparison? Like, one thing you mentioned is that you always had this feeling that Russia was on the edge of the cliff, and then somehow it stayed. Of course, in the Soviet Union, it was like that, but then actually it did fall off the cliff eventually, surprisingly. Do you see many parallels between what we're living through now, what we were living through at the end of the Soviet Union, or is it just so unpredictable we cannot tell?
Well, I mean, we all have, Jenny has her own view on this, and I have. Just small example. I mean, they are comparable and they're not comparable, because the Soviet experience was we're living off, at least I was in high school, and basically it was almost the end of it. So I was living off the Soviet Union. So when perestroika happened, I was young, and Soviet was just completely, this joke that was there. They pretended they're paying us, and we pretended they're working. So we lived in that. They pretend that whatever it is, wherever it is. So there are elements of it, but it's not it, because once again, even the Soviet Union was a simulation of normalcy. And I said, this is a simulacrum, it doesn't exist. I mean, whatever it is, it doesn't exist. So there are elements of it indeed, but I'm, to even small answer, I grew up, and probably Zhenya grew up as well. I grew up without Stalin. Stalin was never, when Khrushchev denounced Stalin in 1956, Stalin didn't exist in public space. I mean, yes, he was mentioned, but he never existed in public space. He was still considered a mass murderer. I mean, you could say he was great, he was conditioned, but he was a mass murderer. Under Putin, and especially now, Stalin is the person. In fact, I think that this summer, the Communist Party, the Russian Communist Party, they wanted to forbid the 20th Party Congress, because they wanted to annul the 20th Party Congress. By the way, this month, in a few weeks, going to be the 70th 70th anniversary. So that is also, that's a very important indicator. So Stalin didn't exist and now he does. But it's not the same, because now it's as bad capitalism as it is, it's still capitalist. I mean, one of the reasons my book was published twice, because the original publisher didn't want this publisher to get all the money. So it's to the question of postmodernism. I mean, all of this, and Putin, by the way, has always been postmodern. Remember when he became president, he returned the anthem, then the military flag, the Russian flag, this flag, so there's a lot of sort of this postmodern stuff happening, so there are elements, but it's not. But even in my Soviet Union, they were, in many ways, there was no freedom, but also there was more freedom. Because, for example, in the Brezhnev era, you would have the gentlemen of fortune, and they would be guys walking around in female outfits and singing. So, and in fact, actually, I think it was 1974, I forgot which year it was, the film Ivan Vasilievich is changing his profession, right? So they were, by the way, that was Grozny. So Grozny, that Ivan the Terrible, Ivan the Terrible. And if those probably will finish on this. When Shurik, one of the characters, talks to the Ivan Vasilievich from the building, who is an administrator of the building, and just says absolutely insane things. Shurik says to him, Ivan Vasilievich, when you speak, I think you are delirious. And every time when I hear Duma or some statement from the Kremlin, I think Vladimir Vladimirovich, every time you speak, you are delirious. So this is a connection, but that delirium was even then recognized as delirium. Now I don't know.
Nina, thank you so much. I think it was excellent presentation. Before you go, I want to tell you that next Thursday, we're going to have a very special guest. This is Michael Calvi, who wrote this book. Rory knows he was one of the most successful American investors in Russia after 1991. He was the one who helped to start, the major Russian technological projects. He wasn't the one who made money on oil. He made money on Yandex, Russian search engine. And it was Michael Calvi who took it, who did LPO, and it was, they collected $2 billion for the money. And then, of course, in 2019, Putin put him in jail. What else to do, with somebody who was, there. So Michael Calvi always was very loyal. And me included, we were writing about what was going on with this guy, American, who is so loyal to Putin. So, but he sort of believed that, Putin was going to bring stability. So yeah, Putin brought stability and put Michael Calvi in jail. So he wrote this book, I read it, it's very interesting from my perspective. So he's coming specially from London, and he will be giving the talk. So next week at 4 p.m. And then 2 weeks from now, we're going to have Victoria Nuland. She was Assistant Secretary of State in charge of Russian affairs and Eurasian affairs and etc. So she's the one who knows the way American policy towards Russia was created, structured, and fake, from my perspective, but maybe I'm wrong. So anyway, so welcome for this time, and thank you so much for coming.
We can also scan a QR code to the next